Good morning. Welcome back to Sunday Sermons, which will happen when and as I see fit. I actually have been wanting to do this for a while, and we're going to talk about the book of Job today, which seems really appropriate given the current state of the world. The book of Job, rather famously, I'm just going to dive right into it. It starts with God in Satan or the enemy or the accuser or whomever this character we should look at. And he says, have you seen my servant Job? He's so faithful. So nice of God. And Job says, well, he's only faithful because you're really good to him. He's rich. He has all these kids. He's respected in the community. If you took everything away from him, he would not be faithful to you. And God says, well, I don't believe that. Prove it. And so that's what happens. Job loses everything, his entire household, his children, his livestock, all of this. And he's left in this super reduced condition, and he continues to be faithful to God. And the enemy says, well, the reason why he's faithful is because his body, his person hasn't been touched. Which right there is a special level of psycho. Like, can you imagine a human being? Like, no, it's fine that my children and my household and my wealth and everything is gone. It's all fine as long as, but I still have my health. I'm good. Like, what? So anyways, God says, well, fine, you can't kill him, but he gives him some skin condition, And so Job is he's lost everything. He's now sick. He's been, reduced to rubble and ashes and is nothing. And his friends come to comfort him, which actually takes up most of the book of Job, is this back and forth between his friends. There are three friends who show up, and they take it upon themselves as friends, quote unquote friends, of people who've had horrible things happen to them, so often do, to try and convince Job, no, you need to repent. There must be some reason this happened to you. God's not unfair, and he wouldn't do such a thing to you. And Job just insists, no, that's not real. I didn't do anything to do this. God owes me an explanation. And then finally, at the end of the book, God comes down and responds. Now, and this is the part that we're going to look at. And the reason we're going to look at it is because typically I have only ever heard this whole thing taught as God comes down, asks a bunch of questions that Job can't answer. And Job's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I don't know anything. Forgive me, God. And God's like, okay, cool. Except when I actually read what God said, like I read it closely, that wasn't what I found. What I found was actually encouraging and very humanizing, very pro-human. So I'm going to walk you guys through that today. And the reason why I want to do that is because so I did this close reading of the book of Job many years ago. It was like 2011, 2012 in there. And then in the time since, I've been through some really, 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 really horrible things. I mean, I've had more than one person say, you're basically like Job. And I'm like, I won't say. I don't like being told that. But having done this study and what I saw there was something that was really important to me. And I relied on it. Like I came back to it repeatedly in some of my darkest moments, and times when I was like, I can't do this. So I want to share that with you guys. This is going to be a little bit longer. So if you need to, you might want to pause and go grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you're drinking. I'll try not to drag here, but we're just going to dive right in. And I'm going to start, it is in chapter 38 is when God shows up. So we're going to read this. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. He said, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. All right, I'm going to go through this. There's a reason I'm going to go through this. This is kind of long. Sorry. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set, or who laid its counterstones? While the morning stars sang together, while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind the doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. And he goes on and he talks about giving orders to the morning and to the dawn and telling, the earth takes shape and going into the recesses of the sea. And he says, what is the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the path to their dwellings? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for time of trouble, for days of war and battle? Goes on about, the lightning and desolate wasteland. And he says, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of lightning? Do you send lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, here we are? Do you give the ibis wisdom or the rooster understanding? I'm not sure the rooster has much understanding. Who has wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heavens? In this end part, do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in the thicket? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander about for lack of food? Okay, so I kind of skipped around there, but you get the gist of it. And the thing that really, this was when I first started seeing I wonder what's going on here. Because if you notice, through most of it, God is describing the natural world in extremely human terms. He's not giving a scientifically accurate description of how things work. There are no storehouses for the snow, there are no lightning bolts that show up. That's not how things actually work. And yet God is willing to take these kind of poetic, fanciful ideas that human beings created to explain things, and basically own them, in us. It's kind of like he's saying, all your best explanations, they're just guesses. And no, we don't really know what's going on, but we've created these poetic explanations for it. And God doesn't reject it. God actually embraces it, even though most of the mythology comes from other ancient Nearest religions, not Hebrew. Which, would be like God to lay claim to absolutely everything. And the other thing, the way this ends, where he talks about the lioness and the food for the raven, when it's young, cry out to God and wander about for lack of food. The truth, and everybody says, oh, God provides them. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. The animals starve and all the time. That's part of life on planet Earth. God doesn't show up and help the lioness with her hunt. She goes out and hunts, and she's successful or she's not, So, anyways, that is chapter 38. Stick with me here. We're going to move on to chapter 39. This is where it really starts to kind of pop out. So we're going to start off. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months till they bear? Do you know the time they give birth? They crouch down and bring forth their young. Their labor pains are ended. Their young thrive and grow strong in the wilds. They leave and do not return. Who let the wild donkey go free? Who untied its ropes? I gave it the wastelands as its home, the salt flats as its habitat. It laughs at the commotion in town. It does not hear a driver shout. It ranges the hills for its pasture and searches for any green things. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will it stay by your manger at night? Will you hold it to the furrow with a harness? Will it till the valleys behind you? Will you rely on it for its great strength? Will you leave your heavy work to it? Can you trust it to haul in your grain and bring it to your threshing floor? I'm going to kind of skip around here real quick because then he goes through the ostrich, the horse, and the hawk. Now, I'd like to point something out about all of these animals. These are all animals that have been domesticated. So if we go back to the very beginning, when God says to Job, do you know when the mountain goat gives birth? Do you watch the doe bear her fawn? Well, at some point, first of all, there are humans who know this. 100%. There are people have been keeping track of this stuff forever. And I've always heard this kind of like God going, do you know this? Do you know that? And Job having to go, no, of course I do not know. Well, no, actually we do know. Like this isn't the greatest mystery. God is actually pointing us to things that we do know. And he's also pointing out that there is a difference between the wild creatures he made, and then we turn them into domesticated animals. This is very much a good part of our relationship with God's creation. We take what God has created and we kind of refine it for our own purposes, which God is pointing out, like, all of these different animals, these are wild animals. These are animals that live, wild goats can live in inaccessible places. The does aren't like showing us where they give birth, right? We have to find that. Horses, oxen, even the ostrich and the hawk, excuse me, all of these are animals that we have basically, harnessed for our own purposes. So again, we're looking at something a bit different than God just being like, who do you think you are? And Job being like, nobody. So I'm going to go through, we're going to skip over to chapters 40 and 41. The Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. Then Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's, and can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at all who are proud and bring them low. Look at all who are proud and humble them. Crush the wicked where they stand. Bury them in the dust together. Shroud their faces in the grave. Then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you. Okay, so this is another one of those passages which is usually read as like God tells Job off, but we'll look at it more closely. First, God asks Job if he would like to correct God, and Job declined. Job isn't taking anything back, he said earlier. He's not apologizing for what he says. He just declines and listens, probably because he's hearing things that are kind of making him think, Then God tells Job what God is doing and why God is coming down to speak to Job. So throughout the book of Job, before God shows up, Job's been insisting it was not his own sin that brought this misery upon him. He doesn't claim he's perfect, but he's dependent on God and his mercy and forgiveness. And Job was faithful. He trusts that there's an explanation for what has happened that doesn't involve God holding some sin against him. But he can't convince anyone else to do that, which is part of Job's complaint, is that those who do not know or love God are now looking down upon him. In Job's downfall, the proud find more reason to be proud. The wicked feel even more justified in taking the path of wickedness. And while Job's life had before been one of faith and it had been like reproof for those who were proud and wicked, now he's in this miserable, weak, pitiful state. His life and his faith look to the proud and wicked as evidence that God's not to be trusted. So his questions point to Job's inability to counter this state of affairs. Job can't bring the proud low or destroy the wicked. He can't clothe himself in glory. He can't defend himself or God. If he could, God wouldn't have needed to come down to defend him. So to do for Job what Job could not do for himself, God does come down. And in this defense, God is also offering a way forward for Job. And I would say for all of us who kind of find ourselves right in this edge of destruction. So this is where we get into the behemoth. Okay. Says, look at the behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar, the sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among God's work, yet its maker can approach it with his sword, or his maker can only approach it with his sword. The hills bring it their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotuses conceal it in their shadow, the poplars by the stream surrounding it. A raging river does not alarm it. It is secure, though the Jordan should surge against its mouth. Can anyone capture it by the eyes, or trap it and pierce its nose? Okay, so the behemoth. God said he made it the same way that he made us, so it seems reasonable to think it's a real animal. Based on the description, many people have said this is a hippopotamus, which I agree. I don't think there's anything that says it wouldn't be, and it does fit the description. And a hippo, unlike the animals God pointed to previously, has never come anywhere close to being domesticated. In fact, a hippo to this day is the most dangerous animal in Africa. It is so dangerous to those that it perceives as a threat or would just like to chase, from some of these boat videos we've seen, that God himself says he'd use a sword to approach the animal. Okay? So that's the animal God points to, his animal, the behemoth. And then after that, he points to a more mysterious animal, the Leviathan. Now, the Leviathan is a creature that nobody has been able to, connect it to a known animal. It really reads, it sounds a lot like a dragon if you listen to it. It has it breathes fire and it has impenetrable scales and is fierce and all of this. So I'm going to read through this real quick because the details in this one are actually kind of important. It says, can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of it like a bird or put it on a leash for the young women in your house? Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak of the Leviathan's limbs, its strength, and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames shoot from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze and flames dart from its mouth. Strength relies in its neck. And it goes on just for a little bit longer, describing this mighty Leviathan. Okay, so my contention is that the Leviathan is not a real creature. It's one of the mythical creatures that we humans have imagined for ourselves. And God points out this creature, which is a product of our own minds, knows how to respond to attack. And if you go to the beginning of 41, where I read, God actually draws a pretty straight line between the way that the Leviathan and even the behemoth, but certainly our creation, the Leviathan, responds to attacks. It says, would you between how the Leviathan responds to attacks and how humans tend to respond to attacks. Let's look at this again real quick because I really think it's important. It says, will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make arrangements with you for you to take it as your slave for life? Okay, humans, what do we do in the face of danger and threats? All too often, there has been a tendency to beg for mercy, to try and speak kind words. I'll be your slave. My children will be your slaves. Our generations will be your slaves, right? We will try to preserve our own life, to the point that we will allow ourselves to become enslaved to other human beings. And that's not how God made us. And we know this. We know that we can fight. We know what it takes because from our own imaginings, we can create creatures who know this stuff, and God does lay claim to all of it because even what we imagined, ultimately it all comes from God. And God's saying, when faced with threats, attacks, attempts at capture, we act like domesticated animals, frankly, right? We'll beg, we bargain, we'll offer ourselves as slaves and pets. That is not the way that Leviathan would do it. We have it in us to envision an animal just as, if not more difficult to attack, capture, and enslave than anything God made. And everything in creation belongs to God, not just because it belongs to him, but because it reflects something of himself that he was able to bring forth into the physical reality. We can't create a Leviathan in the physical world, but it's a creation that comes out of something in ourselves as well. And I think God is telling Job and us that we do know what to do in the face of an attacker who would like to capture us and enslave us. Job knows he isn't suffering because of his own sin, both because he's been faithful and because he knows that God is just as faithful with his mercy and forgiveness. So he knows he's right, but he can't convince anyone else of this reality. And here he is. He's sitting on the ground, suffering, being ridiculed, essentially. And God appears to defend Job where he cannot defend himself, but also to tell Job to defend himself, fight. When the enemy attacks, we aren't supposed to be like domesticated animals and become a slave or a beast of burden or a pet. We're not made to be domesticated, much less by God's enemy. When we're attacked, we should be fighting and back in such a way that the accuser will remember the struggle and never do it again. All right? So now we're going to move on to chapter 42, where Job now responds. He says, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer. My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. And so this is usually read as Job saying, yes, God, you're all right. I'm a peon. I have no cause to complain, no matter how much I'm suffering. But when we go back and look at what God has actually said, it's a slightly different picture. I believe that God's message to Job was basically, Job, you're right. You don't deserve this. I'm here to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Bring down the wicked and foolish who see your destruction as reasons to be proud and contemptuous. But I didn't make you defenseless. Look at who I made you to be. When you do not understand, you imagine things that are sometimes beautiful and true. Humans have taken wild animals I created and found those suitable for your own purposes and made them serve you. But you're not a domesticated animal. Look at the behemoth that I made along with you. It fights. You know how. Humans have imagined for themselves creatures more fierce and untamable than anything that walks the earth. And Job understood enough of what God was saying to see that sitting in the dirt, listening to his friend's theories, and defending himself wasn't the answer to his problems. He was in a spiritual fight, and now he understands he needs to fight back. So then it goes on. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends because you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. So again, God did not say Job was wrong. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite did what God told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. So this isn't just a matter of God reprimanding Job's friends. He's actually asking Job to do for his friends what he used to do for his own children. And he's entrusting Job with his friend's spiritual well-being in the same way that he was in the habit of caring for his children's spiritual well-being. So God is both affirming what Job has always done for those in his care and expanding it. And then after that, it says, after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought on him, and each gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camel, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first daughter he named Jemima, the second Keziah, and the third Karen Hapush. Sorry. Nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughter, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so Job died, an old man and full of years. All right. So a couple things I want to point out here. First of all, you notice that restoration isn't just about, getting things back. It also has to do with relationships. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came. And they didn't just show up like his friends did to be like, look what you did. How bad is this? They came offering restoration. They came with something in their hands, which I don't know why humans haven't seemed to figure this out yet, but that's what you do when someone's in trouble. That's what you do when somebody's facing destruction. You show up for them, not to tell them, admit what you've done wrong, and look at what's happened to your life because you're so blah, 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 blah. All of that. That is, unfortunately, that does tend to be the first to show up when something goes horribly awry. However, by God's doing, the people who show up are the people who want to comfort you and the people who come with something in their hand for you. We don't show up for people who've been destroyed with nothing but our prayers and thoughts. We show up with things in hand, whatever we're able to. And then it goes through, obviously poor Job's wife. The Bible was written by men, and many men are completely and totally delusional about pregnancy and childbirth. It is not a blessing to have to go through 9 more or 10 more pregnancies and childbirths after losing your family. That's not a gift. Men, hi, not a gift, not good, not a blessing. Listen to women. So anyways, but that was what happened. However, in that, there's a book called Getting Involved with God by Old Testament Hebrew scholar Ellen Davis. And she points out a few significant things about the ending of the passage of Job. First of all, his daughters are named and not his sons. That never happens. Ever. Not only are the names listed, the names are outrageous. Jemima is a reference to a beautiful queen of Arab folklore. Keziah is the name of a spice tree used for perfume. Karen Hapuch is a type of makeup. So it's like naming your daughters Cinderella, Passion, and L'Oreal. Except that's like from the 80s, guys. Sorry, I'm dating myself. I don't keep up on makeup and perfume, so you'll get what was cool in the 80s. But they were beautiful. Job gave them an inheritance along with their brothers, which was just as extravagant as a gesture as their outrageous names. And why was this the particular reaction that Job had? Well, I would guess it's because it's a particularly potent way of fighting back against the enemy. Job is a devout man who knows God. He is deliberately rejecting a common lie of the enemy, that women are less than, worth less, and not to be valued as highly as men. And I love that Job could think of no better way to fight back against the enemy with so much force that he would never forget the battle and would not do it again than to honor his girl children. All right. So that is my going through the last chapters of the book of Job. And I said this was really important to me personally when I was going through a situation where, I had lost everything and everybody, and I was not getting any help. I was getting the opposite of help. And I'm like, I promise, I really, I was like, what did I do in the middle of this? What can I take responsibility for? But at the end, and it's even more now, it's been 4.5 years since this started. Like, I didn't do anything to justify any of this. There is absolutely nothing that I did that any normal, reasonable person would be like, well, people, when you act like that, what do you expect people to do? Nothing. And so it really was a lot like Job. And if I had been working with this idea that when we suffer, and we suffer for not even through our own fault, it's not, it's not sin. You can't even fix it. Like, at least if something terrible is happening to you because of your own sin or your own failures or your own faults, well, you can fix that. If something terrible is happening to you and you didn't do anything, like, there's nothing, you can't fix it. You can't fix it. You can't be like, oh, well, maybe if I quit doing heroin, my life will get better. Like, I used to say that on the streets when I was with people. They'd be telling me, I did this and I did that and I did this other thing and I made this mistake and I made this bad choice. And I was like, well, I didn't do any of those things and I'm standing right here next to you, Excuse me. I had the life of a heroin addict and I had never done drugs. It was ridiculous. So I get this. And if I really thought that God's answer to that situation was, you're a peon, you just don't know how things work, I'm so much greater than you, how dare you challenge me, which is really what I had always heard taught. Like, that's not helpful to me, frankly, in a situation where I need to survive after being reduced to absolutely nothing. But the message of, you know what, human beings, you guys are imaginative. You're creative. You know how to fight. You've domesticated animals. Like, human beings have dreamed up creatures that are unstoppable. And if you can dream it, well, then you have something of that in you, And so that really was that idea of to fight back in such a way that the enemy will regret it and will never do it again, really stayed with me. I often say I try to be a really good person out of spite. Like, truly. So, but it becomes so that every time somebody does something horrible to me, like, yeah, it hurts, but I'm not going to, say, well, but what if I agree to lay down and let you walk on me? What if I agree to let you lead me around by my nose? Here, let me talk nicely to you. Let me serve you. No. No. Every time somebody does something screwed up to me, I go do something really good. Every time I'm scared, I take an action to make myself feel safer or to help another person. Every time I'm angry, I take action to try and make the world a better place. Every time the enemy or whomever we want to credit the horrors of the world to, every time I take it as an opportunity to fight back using God's ways, because God's ways are to love, to serve, to be graceful, to be merciful, to, to care, to have empathy, to have compassion, to meet unmet needs. Those are God's ways. So every time the enemy wants to come at me with, setbacks, with loss, with condemnation, well, that is just fuel for me to go further into God's ways, which is how I wouldn't say I'm back to, things are still screwed up with my kids, but it's been 4.5 years since I was put on the street with a bag of clothing and a laptop and hadn't earned income for 22 years. And I'm sitting here today in a very nice neighborhood in a very nice townhouse, being stable. I've been here for 2.5 years. I'm happy. I'm healthy. I have good relationships with people. And I really believe that's because rather than just being like, oh, woe is me, I didn't do anything wrong, let me tell you all the things I didn't do wrong, I took action. I did what humans do. What God said, look at you. You guys can imagine things. You can create things. You can become things. You don't have to be slaves. Fight back. Don't let people do that to you. So that's what I did. And I hope that if you are facing your own Job story, that maybe it will be helpful to you to think, to see this in this way, to see that the response to great suffering, especially great suffering that we didn't bring on ourselves, is to fight back in such a way that the enemy will regret it. And I believe that's the message of the book of Job. So there you go. Thank you so much to everyone who's stuck with me. If you haven't already, please go out to my website, theupsidedownworld.com. You can explore videos. You can see what I'm doing. There's links to the blog there. There's merchandise and books and links to all my social media. Please connect with me on social media. And I hope this was helpful to someone, and I will talk with you guys again soon, whenever soon is. All right. Love you. Bye.